When I look back at my life now, I often wonder, was it worth it? All those nights I spent awake, worrying, praying, sacrificing for my daughters. I used to think love meant giving everything you have, even if it leaves you empty. But life has a way of teaching you that love, too, needs balance. My name is Amira, and this is the story of how I gave up my life for my daughters, and how everything changed because of it. I grew up in a small town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone's story before you even told it. My parents weren't rich, but we had respect, and that meant everything. My father was a school teacher, quiet, dignified, always reading something. My mother ran the house with a firm but loving hand. And me. I was their only daughter. I used to dream of being a writer or a teacher like my father. But in our town, dreams for girls were often replaced by responsibilities before they even began to bloom. At 22, I was married. Not because I wanted to, but because it was time. That's what they said. It's time. My husband Rashid was handsome, charming, and came from a well-known family. Everyone said I was lucky. And for a little while, I believed them. The first few years were fine, simple, even peaceful. We lived in a small apartment, and I learned to manage everything from cooking to stretching the monthly expenses. And when our first daughter, Sana, was born, my heart opened in ways I never knew were possible. She was tiny, fragile, but her eyes, they carried the same curiosity I once had. 2 years later came Heba, my second daughter, my sunshine, always smiling, always reaching out for hugs. From that moment on, my world revolved around them. Every morning began with their laughter, every night ended with their soft breathing beside me. I didn't have friends anymore. I didn't go out much. But it didn't matter, because in their little faces I saw my purpose. Soft pause, sound of clock ticking, gentle sigh. But life has a strange way of testing even the purest hearts. When Sana turned 5, Rashid's attitude began to change. He became distant, quiet, as if the sight of our simple home annoyed him. He started coming home late, sometimes not at all. At first I told myself, he's just tired, maybe work is stressful. But then came the whispers. The strange phone calls. And one day, a neighbor with pity in her eyes told me she had seen him with another woman. My world stopped. I remember sitting on the kitchen floor that night, the girls asleep in their room, my heart breaking into pieces I couldn't pick up. I kept telling myself, no, he's my husband, he wouldn't. But deep inside I knew. And when I finally confronted him, he didn't even deny it. He just said, Amira, you've changed, you're just a mother now. Those words sliced through me like a blade. Just a mother. As if being a mother made me less of a woman. I wanted to scream, to cry, to tell him how I gave up my youth, my dreams, my everything for this family, but all that came out was silence. That night I made a decision. If he wanted freedom, I would give it to him. But I would not let my daughters pay the price for his choices. So I stayed. Not for love, not for pride, but for Sana and Heba. I told myself they will grow up in a stable home, even if that home is built on my tears. Days turned into months. Months into years. And every day I wore the same calm smile for them. When they laughed, I laughed. When they cried, I held them until their tears stopped. No matter how broken I felt, they never saw it. Because a mother's strength is her silence. Music shifts, soft, hopeful strings. The girls grew fast. Sana, the elder one, was always responsible, the kind who helped me with chores, always made sure her little sister finished her homework. Heba, on the other hand, was wild and curious. She'd dance in the rain, climb trees, laugh out loud. They were opposites, but together they completed my world. Sometimes I'd watch them sleeping and whisper, maybe one day you'll understand why I stayed. But the truth was, as the years passed, I wasn't sure I understood it myself anymore. Then one day, something happened that changed everything. Rashid lost his job. And suddenly, the man who once ignored us began to depend on me. I started sewing clothes for neighbors, then small boutiques. Word spread fast, Amira's work is neat, elegant, full of love. Before I knew it, I was running a small home business. My hands hurt, my back ached, but my heart felt alive again. For the first time in years, I felt like me. But Rashid couldn't handle it. My small success became his shame. He'd say, "People will think I can't provide, stop this nonsense." I didn't listen. Because I had finally learned something. A mother's love doesn't mean destroying yourself to prove loyalty. It means standing up so your daughters see what strength looks like. And that strength was about to be tested again, harder than ever before. One evening, Rashid came home drunk, angry, shouting. He accused me of turning the girls against him. Sana, now 16, stood between us, her hands trembling but firm. "Don't talk to Mama like that," she said. He raised his hand, and that was the moment something in me broke completely. I grabbed my daughters, ran into the rain, barefoot, heart pounding. We left that house, the house that held all my pain, and never went back. Music slows, raindrops fade, gentle piano returns. That night we slept at a friend's house. I held both my girls and whispered, "From now on we make our own home. It may be small, but it will be filled with peace." And for the first time I felt free. Terrified, yes, but free. A week after I pawned the ring, the weather turned colder. Spring was trying to push its way through the grey, but the mornings still carried that sharp chill that seeps into your bones when you step outside before sunrise. I'd grown used to those early mornings, coffee in a travel mug, hair pulled back tight, uniform pressed and ready. The diner was quiet that week, quieter than usual. The regulars came in, old Mr. Thompson with his crossword puzzles, the group of retired teachers who gossiped about everyone but themselves, but tips were small and shifts were long. Still, I didn't complain. Every dollar had a destination now, Emily's dream. Sometimes, when I was scrubbing the counters after closing, I'd look down at my bare hand. It felt strange, lighter somehow, like a part of me was missing but also free. My co-workers noticed eventually. "Lose something, Mary?" One of them, a girl named Tina, had asked, glancing at my empty finger as we counted the cash drawer. "Just decided it was time," I said quietly, keeping my eyes on the receipts. She didn't press. People in small towns learn not to ask questions they don't want the answers to. At home, Emily was living in her own little world of sketches and paint. Every corner of the apartment was slowly being claimed by her art, brushes on the windowsill, pencils rolling under the couch, canvases leaning against the walls. Sometimes I'd trip over them when I came home late, half asleep, and she'd laugh softly and say, "Sorry, Mom, I'll clean it up tomorrow." I'd just smile, because deep down, every paint stain and pencil mark felt like proof that she was still dreaming. One evening I came home earlier than usual. She didn't hear me walk in. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, painting under the dim yellow light of the lamp. The canvas showed a woman standing in front of a pawn shop. Her shoulders were hunched, her face hidden, but somehow I knew it was me. She must have been inspired by something she'd seen that day, or maybe it was the way she felt me pulling away. I stood there quietly, not wanting to interrupt her. But then she said, without turning around, "Mom, did you ever regret something you had to do?" The question hung in the air, my throat tightened. "Every day," I said finally. She looked back at me, her eyes soft but searching. "I think grown-ups hide a lot of their regrets." I walked over and sat beside her, watching the brush glide across the canvas. "Maybe, but sometimes we hide them because they're part of our love, Emily. And love, well, it's not always pretty." She nodded, dipping her brush in blue. "I think love is the saddest color sometimes." I smiled faintly. "Maybe, but it's also the one that never fades." For a moment we just sat there, two souls trying to hold the world together with art and words. A few days later the mail came, a white envelope with the school's logo printed neatly in the corner. I tore it open before even taking off my coat. It was the invoice for the second payment. I knew it was coming, but somehow seeing the numbers printed in black ink made my stomach twist. I was still a few hundred short. That night I sat on the edge of my bed, counting crumpled bills, calculating every expense in my head. Rent, groceries, electricity. Even if I skipped meals and picked up another shift, it still wouldn't be enough. There's a moment when hope and despair start to blur together, and you can't tell which one you're feeling anymore. That's where I was. Then I remembered something, the pawn ticket. The ring was still there. I hadn't technically sold it, I'd pawned it. That meant I had 30 days to buy it back, 30 days before it would belong to someone else forever. I opened my wallet and stared at the thin, yellow slip of paper. It suddenly looked like a reminder of everything I'd lost and everything I was trying to save. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Emily woke up early, excited about a school art showcase. "Mom, they're choosing one student to feature their work at the county fair. Can you come?" Of course, I said yes. She worked on that piece for days. I watched her pour every ounce of herself into it. She painted until her fingers cramped, until there was paint on her face and in her hair. I couldn't help thinking, this is what dreams look like when they're still fragile and pure. The night before the showcase, she asked if we could have pizza. "Just like when Dad was here," she said. That caught me off guard. She didn't mention him often. We sat on the floor eating from the box, laughing about nothing and everything. She told me about her teacher, about her classmates, about how she felt like her life was finally going somewhere. And then she said something that broke me in the quietest way. "Mom, when I make it big someday, I'm going to buy you something beautiful. Maybe a gold ring. You used to wear one, right?" The pizza in my mouth turned to ash. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Yeah, sweetheart, I did." She smiled, not knowing the weight of her words. "Then I'll get you a new one, even prettier." I excused myself to the bathroom before she could see my eyes filling. Inside, I stared at my reflection. The woman in the mirror looked tired, older than she remembered. But behind those tired eyes was something else, a strength I didn't know I still had. I whispered to myself, "It's worth it, every bit of it." The day of the showcase arrived. Emily stood by her painting, a breathtaking scene of a small woman holding a burning candle in a storm. The candlelight illuminated her face even as rain poured down around her. The caption read, "My mother's hands." When people stopped to look, they didn't just admire the technique, they felt something. I could see it in their eyes. And for the first time in years, I felt something too. Pride, pure glowing pride. After the show, Emily ran up to me, cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mom, they picked me, I'm going to the fair." I hugged her so tight she squealed. "Oh honey, I'm so proud of you." She pulled back, grinning from ear to ear. "This means they'll send my work to the school board. I might even get extra funding." I smiled, but deep down, I knew that even with help, the money problem wasn't over. The next payment was due in a week. That night when Emily went to bed, I sat again at the kitchen table, the same place where it had all begun. The bills, the receipts, the pawn slip. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the phone and called the diner. "Hey, it's Mary," I said when the manager picked up. "Any chance I could pick up the closing shifts this weekend?" There was a pause. "Mary, that's a lot, you'll burn yourself out." "I can handle it," I said quietly. "I need it." He sighed. "All right, sweetheart, you got it." And just like that, the next few days blurred into a haze of exhaustion and coffee and aching feet. I'd come home after midnight, collapse on the couch, and wake up before dawn to do it again. But I didn't mind. Because every time I thought of Emily's smile, every time I imagined her standing in that art school surrounded by color and light, I found strength I didn't know existed. Sometimes love doesn't feel like tenderness. Sometimes it feels like fighting, tooth and nail, against a world that keeps taking from you. And that's what I did, I fought. By the end of that week, I had just enough to cover the second payment. I sent it off with trembling hands, whispering a small prayer of thanks. When I opened my wallet later, the pawn ticket was still there, folded neatly behind my ID. I touched it once more, tracing the numbers printed in faded ink. I could still get the ring back. Maybe next month if things got better, maybe after Emily left for the program. But deep down I knew. The ring was never coming back. Still, when Emily came home that evening, waving a new sketch in my face, laughing and talking about colors and dreams, I realized something. I didn't need a ring to remind me of love. I had it right there, sitting across from me, covered in paint and hope. The week after I sent in the payment, the skies turned dark and restless. It rained for 3 straight days, not the gentle kind of rain that makes you want to sit by the window with a cup of tea, but the hard, pounding kind that sounds like it's trying to wash the world clean of everything you've ever known. Those nights as the rain beat against the roof, I'd lie awake listening to the storm and thinking of all the moments that had brought me here. The ring, the pawn ticket, the endless shifts. The tired hands that no longer looked like the hands of a young woman, but those of a mother who had given everything she had, and still somehow found more to give. Emily loved the rain. She said it made her feel alive, like the world was crying with her and for her. I'd often find her sitting by the window, sketchbook in hand, eyes wide with wonder as lightning flashed in the distance. One night I came home late, soaked from head to toe, my shoes squishing with every step. Emily was still awake, sitting cross-legged near the window, sketching again. "Hey, sweetheart," I said softly, peeling off my wet jacket. She looked up and smiled. "You're home early." "It's almost midnight," I said with a laugh. "I know, I just couldn't sleep, I'm working on something new." I hung up my coat and walked over to see. The page showed a single hand, a woman's hand, holding a small bird. The bird's wings were half open, as if it couldn't decide whether to stay or fly. "It's beautiful," I whispered. She smiled shyly. "I was thinking about you, how you always hold me just tight enough to keep me safe but never so tight that I can't dream." I swallowed hard, blinking away the tears that came too easily these days. "That's what moms do, sweetheart." "Then you're the best one," she said simply. "It's funny how a few words from your child can undo a day's worth of exhaustion." I went to bed that night feeling lighter, as if for a brief moment the world had stopped taking and had given something back instead. But storms, in my experience, rarely stay outside. Sometimes they find their way in. A few days later, I got a call from the diner. "Mary, I'm sorry," my manager said, his voice uneasy. "We're cutting hours next month, business is slow. I can keep you on weekends, but the weekday shifts, they're gone." For a moment I couldn't speak. The phone felt heavy in my hand. "That's okay," I said quietly, forcing a small laugh. "I understand." But when I hung up, I just sat there at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock, it all sounded so loud. I thought of the bills, of Emily's tuition, of how close we were and how far we still had to go. When Emily came home that evening, she could tell something was wrong. "Mom's you okay?" I smiled, the same practiced smile I'd worn too many times before. "Just tired, sweetheart." She tilted her head. "You've been tired for months." "I know," I said softly, "but tired means I'm working towards something right." She didn't answer, she just hugged me. That night after she went to bed, I sat by the window she loved so much. The rain had stopped, but the world still felt heavy. I took out the pawn ticket again, turning it over in my hand. It had become worn, the edges frayed from being folded and unfolded so many times. I told myself I was only keeping it as a reminder, but the truth was, it had become a symbol. Not of what I'd lost, but of the moment I decided that love meant action, not words. Still, sometimes in the dark, I missed that ring more than I wanted to admit. I missed the way it felt when I'd twist it while thinking. I missed how it caught the sunlight when I was hanging laundry or holding James's hand. Memories are funny like that. They hurt and heal in the same breath. A few days later, the storm hit harder, not the kind that falls from the sky, but the kind that hits you from the inside out. Emily came home quiet that day, too quiet. I was at the stove cooking soup when she dropped her backpack on the floor and sat down at the table without saying a word. "Everything okay, honey?" I asked. She didn't look up. Mrs. Harding pulled me aside today. "Her art teacher. What did she say?" "She said she heard about the school's payment issue. She said if I can't pay the remaining balance by the deadline, they'll have to give my spot to someone else." The spoon in my hand stopped mid-stir. "What?" "I thought it was a scholarship," Emily said, her voice cracking. "I thought they wanted me there." "They do," I said quickly, walking over to her. "Sweetheart, they do, it's just—" "Then why does it feel like the whole world is testing us, Mom?" Her voice broke and she covered her face with her hands. I knelt beside her, pulling her into my arms. She was trembling. I could feel the frustration in her, the same kind I used to feel when I was her age, the helpless kind that makes you want to scream into the wind. "Emily," I whispered, "listen to me. You've worked too hard for this, you're not giving up now, I'll figure it out." Her head lifted, eyes glistening. "How, Mom? You already work all the time, we don't have anything left to sell." For a second I couldn't breathe, because she was right. But I forced a smile anyway. "You let me worry about that, okay? You just keep painting." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You always say that, but what if it's too much? What if—" "Emily," my voice cracked but I steadied it. Dreams don't come cheap, sweetheart, but they're worth everything. She fell silent, and for a long time neither of us spoke. The only sound was the simmering soup on the stove. When she finally went to her room, I sat back at the table, that same table that had become my battlefield. I took out my phone and started scrolling through old contacts. Maybe someone owed me a favor. Maybe there was another shift somewhere. But as I stared at the list, reality sank in. There was no one left to call. The next morning I woke up before dawn, unable to sleep. I put on my coat and walked out into the cold. The streets were still wet from last night's rain, and the air smelled like fresh earth and loneliness. I didn't know where I was going until I saw it, the pawn shop, its neon open sign flickering in the grey light. I stood across the street for a long time, staring at that sign. Inside, behind that glass window, was the ring, my past, my promise, my pain. And maybe my answer. I crossed the street and stepped inside. The same man was behind the counter. He looked up surprised. Back so soon? I just wanted to check on something, I said quietly, pulling the pawn ticket from my pocket. He took it, scanned it and nodded. Still here, you've got 2 days left before it goes up for sale. 2 days. I nodded slowly, thank you. He looked at me for a moment, then said, you can always extend the hold if you pay the fee. I smiled faintly. I can't even pay the electric bill right now. He gave a sympathetic shrug, then handed the ticket back. I walked out, the cold wind biting my cheeks. I didn't know what I was feeling, regret, grief, determination, maybe all three. As I turned the corner, I whispered to the sky, James, I hope you'd understand. Because I was about to make a choice that would change everything again. That night, Emily came into my room holding something behind her back. What's that? I asked. She hesitated, then brought it forward. It was her sketchbook. I want to sell some of my drawings. I shook my head immediately. No, absolutely not. Why not? She said, her voice trembling. People sell art all the time. Maybe someone will buy them. Maybe it could help. Emily, those drawings are your heart. They're not for sale. Neither was your ring, Mum. The words hit me like a slap. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked down, realizing what she'd said. I didn't mean. I know, I said softly. I know you didn't. She started to cry again and I pulled her close. We'll figure it out, baby, we always do. But that night after she fell asleep, I sat awake for hours. Her words kept echoing in my head. Neither was your ring. And she was right. Some things in life aren't meant to be sold, but sometimes love demands it anyway. It's strange how life can feel peaceful one moment and unpredictable the next. Just when you think the storms have passed, a new wind begins to rise, not to break you this time, but to show you how strong you've become. Months passed after Heber's first art exhibition. She was busy painting, selling, growing, her confidence blooming like spring after a long winter. And Sana, thousands of miles away, kept sending messages, pictures of her new office, her apartment, her life. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Until one night my phone rang. It was Sana. Her voice was trembling. Mama, I don't know what to do. They're cutting staff at work. I might lose my job. For a few seconds my heart stopped. I could hear the fear in her voice, the same fear I once felt when everything in my world collapsed. I spoke softly. My love, jobs come and go, but strength, faith, that's what keeps you standing. Remember what I always told you. She whispered, to never let fear make the decisions. I smiled, though tears filled my eyes. That's my girl. Music softens, tone of empathy and calm reassurance. Over the next few weeks, I could sense her struggle. Sana tried to sound fine over the phone, but a mother always knows. She'd laugh, but her laughter carried exhaustion. Meanwhile, back home, Heber was preparing for her second art show in another city. She was nervous, excited, restless. I was so proud, and yet I couldn't stop worrying about Sana. Then one evening, just before Heber's trip, I received a message from Sana. Mama, I can't pay rent this month, I'm sorry. I didn't hesitate. That same night, I took the money I had been saving for Heber's travel expenses and sent it to Sana. When Heber found out, she was upset. Mama, this was for my exhibition. I took her hands and said softly, "Your sister needs it now, your time will come again." She pulled her hands away, tears welling up. "It's always her first, Mama, always Sana." Her words pierced my heart. I wanted to explain that a mother doesn't choose favorites, she chooses who needs her most at that moment. But I didn't. Because sometimes silence speaks more than words ever could. Heba left for her exhibition angry, and I stayed home, praying she'd understand one day. Music fades, quiet echoing emotion, sound of rain begins. The next few days were hard. The house felt empty, not because both daughters were gone, but because there was a distance I couldn't fill. Then on the third night my phone rang again. It was an unknown number. A woman's voice said, "Ma'am, your daughter Heba has been in an accident." For a moment the world stopped moving. The room spun, my knees went weak, and I could barely breathe. I don't remember how I got there, the bus, the hospital, the hours of waiting. All I remember is the sound of the doctor's voice. "She's safe now, but it will take time for her leg to heal." When I finally saw her, lying in that hospital bed, pale, fragile, tubes running from her arms, I broke down. I held her hand and whispered, "SHH, Mama's here, you're okay now." She opened her eyes weakly and murmured, "I'm sorry, Mama, I said terrible things before I left." Tears rolled down my cheeks. "Oh, my love, you don't need to apologize, I'm just thankful you're here." Soft piano returns, tone of comfort and healing. I stayed by her side for weeks. Every morning I helped her sit up, fed her soup, and read her favorite stories aloud. Sana called every night, crying, wishing she could be there too. But she couldn't afford to fly home. So I became both comfort and strength, the same way I had always been. There were nights when I would look at my daughters, childhood photos on my phone, their smiles, their innocence, and I'd whisper, "God, give me a few more years, just enough to see them fully bloom." Heba eventually recovered, but slowly. Her leg healed, but her spirit took longer. She felt lost, her art, her freedom, her confidence, all seemed to have faded. I knew that feeling too well. One evening, as we sat on the balcony, I said quietly, "You know, Heba, I once thought my life ended when your father left, but it didn't. It just changed shape." She looked at me confused. "What do you mean?" I smiled softly. "When something breaks, you can either throw it away or rebuild it into something new. That's what life is, constant rebuilding." She didn't say anything at first. But later that night, she took out her brushes again. She painted herself sitting on a wheelchair, holding a broken brush, and yet around her were flowers blooming wildly. She titled it Still Growing. That painting sold for more money than any of her previous ones. Music grows gently hopeful, soft strings and piano. Around that same time, Sana finally got a new job, one even better than before. Her message came at dawn. "Mama, we made it, I got it." I laughed and cried all at once. And when I showed the message to Heba, she smiled and said, "I'm happy for her, Mama, really." I hugged her, whispering, "You see, my love, everything happens in its time. Your sister found her path and you found your art again. That's all I ever wanted." Soft pause, birds, morning light sounds. Months later, both of my daughters returned home together, one from abroad, one from her recovery. When I opened the door and saw them standing side by side, I couldn't hold back my tears. We hugged for a long time. Sana said, "Mama, we missed your food." Heba laughed, "And your long lectures." We spent that evening cooking, laughing, telling stories. The house finally felt alive again. As we sat down to eat, Sana looked at me and said, "Mama, we were talking on the flight, we want to do something for you." I smiled. For me, what could I possibly want? Heba took my hand and said, "We found a little house not far from here, a small garden, a big kitchen and lots of sunlight. We want you to live there, your own home, Mama. No more rent, no more worries." I froze. My throat tightened and tears filled my eyes. For years I had dreamt of such a home, not grand, just peaceful. I whispered, "You two are my homes." But they insisted, and weeks later we moved. Music rises, soft crescendo, emotional tone. The house was small but beautiful. In the backyard we planted flowers together, roses for love, jasmine for hope, and marigolds for new beginnings. Every morning, sunlight filled the kitchen. I'd make tea, sit on the porch, and watch the wind play with the flowers. Sometimes I'd close my eyes and whisper, "Thank you, life, you took so much but gave back more than I ever expected." Soft narration shift, reflective and gentle. Now, years later, when people ask me if I regret the sacrifices I made, I smile and say, "No, my dear, because love isn't about keeping, it's about giving and trusting that what you give will return in ways you never imagined." Sana visits often now. She brings gifts, hugs, and stories from far away. Heba runs art workshops for young girls, teaching them to paint their emotions, their fears, their dreams. And me. I spend my days surrounded by peace, laughter, and the warmth of everything I once thought I had lost. The next morning smelled of rain-washed earth and weak sunshine. I stood by the kitchen window, hands wrapped around my chipped mug, watching the street wake up. For the first time in weeks, the ache in my chest wasn't sharp. It was soft, almost tender, like a bruise that had begun to heal. Emily came out wearing her favorite denim jacket, hair pulled into a messy bun streaked with a faint line of paint. She looked so alive, so unaware of the weight her mother had carried for her. "Morning, Mom," she said between bites of toast. "You know, I had the strangest dream. Dad was painting beside me. He said I should use more yellow." I smiled. He always liked the bright colors. "Yeah," she said, glancing at me, "kind of like you do." Those words, simple as they were, hit deep. Maybe she saw the flicker of courage coming back to me. Maybe she just wanted to believe it was still there. After she left for school, I cleaned the apartment the way I used to when James was alive. Slowly, with music playing, sunlight catching dust in the air. Every dish I washed, every shelf I wiped felt like reclaiming a tiny piece of myself I'd abandoned to grief. Then the phone rang. It was Mrs. Harding, Emily's art teacher. "Mrs. Turner, I wanted to ask if Emily would be able to attend the regional art fair next month. There's a small scholarship attached. She's been nominated." For a moment I couldn't speak, the world blurred. A scholarship. Yes, it's not huge, but if she wins, it could cover her program fees for the next term. After the call ended, I sank into the nearest chair. My hands were trembling again, but this time from hope. That afternoon I walked past the pawnshop again. I hadn't planned to. I told myself I was running errands, but somehow my steps always found their way back there. The display window gleamed with other people's memories. A saxophone, a wedding veil, a row of watches ticking softly. And there, near the center, was my ring. The light caught on its worn gold, the same way it had the day James had slipped it on my finger. It no longer looked like loss to me, it looked like love fulfilled. I whispered through the glass, "Take care of her for me," and turned away before tears could come. When I got home, the answering machine blinked. A message from the community center. They needed help setting up for the senior art class that evening. I'd left my name there months ago, offering to volunteer, and had almost forgotten. I went. Inside, the smell of turpentine and paper brought back memories of the nights Emily and I painted together on the kitchen floor. I arranged chairs, filled water jars, wiped tables. The instructor, a kindly woman with silver hair, smiled. "You have a good hand, Mary. Ever thought of painting again yourself?" I laughed softly. "It's been years." "Well," she said, handing me a brush, "years pass whether we use them or not." I stayed after class that night, painting quietly on a scrap of canvas someone had left behind. The strokes were clumsy at first, then steadier. Color found its way back into my fingers, and for the first time since James died, I wasn't painting sadness, I was painting dawn. Days passed. The world didn't suddenly become easier, but it began to make sense again. The landlord gave me an extension. The diner finally added an extra morning shift. I saved every spare dollar for Emily's fair trip. One evening, Emily came home holding a letter. "Mom, look," she unfolded it, eyes wide. "It's from the City Gallery. They saw my work online. They want me to submit a piece for their youth showcase." I stared at her, at the excitement trembling in her voice. "Emily, that's incredible." She grinned. "I'm going to call it The Promise of Tomorrow. It's about us." I didn't ask what part of us she meant. I just hugged her. Because in that moment I knew every sleepless night, every tear, every sacrifice was finding its way into her art. The day of the fair came sooner than expected. The morning air smelled of spring, and the sun sat gentle on our faces. Emily stood beside her easel, clutching her brushes, and I felt the same pride I'd felt the day she took her first steps. When the judges came by, I watched quietly from a distance. They stopped at her painting longer than at most others. One of them even leaned closer, nodding thoughtfully. Hours later, when they announced the winners, I held my breath. First place, the announcer said, goes to Emily Turner for The Promise of Tomorrow. The crowd clapped. Emily's mouth fell open. She turned toward me, eyes wide with disbelief. I nodded, tears already spilling down my cheeks. She ran into my arms, whispering, "We did it, Mom, we really did." And all I could say was, "You did, sweetheart, you did." That night, after the celebration, we walked home under the quiet glow of streetlights. Emily carried the small scholarship envelope in her hand like it was a treasure. "Mom," she said softly, "I think Dad was there today." "I think so too," I replied. "He's in every bit of color you paint." She smiled up at me, "And you're the reason I get to paint at all." Her words wrapped around me like warmth. For years, I'd worn a ring that symbolized love. Now I realized I was living inside it, the circle of giving, losing, and finding again. When we reached home, she placed the envelope on the table. "We'll open it together tomorrow," she said. "I just want to remember this feeling tonight." She went to bed humming that same hopeful tune. And I stood there in the quiet apartment, looking at the little painting she'd made for the fair. A sunrise over two figures holding hands, the light spilling between them. I whispered to the empty room, "We're going to be okay, James, she's going to shine." Outside, the first star appeared, faint but certain. And for the first time in years, I felt the world breathe with me. The night after the fair was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that hums with change. I couldn't sleep, so I sat by the window, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, watching the town lights blink in the distance. Emily's painting leaned against the wall beside me, her brushes still resting in a jar half filled with cloudy water. Everything felt different now, not perfect, not easy, just different, like a page had turned somewhere in the story of our lives. My eyes wandered to the small wooden box on the table, the one where I used to keep my jewelry. I hadn't opened it in months. Inside were a few trinkets, a faded photograph, and an empty velvet slot where the ring had once been. For a long time I just looked at that empty space. It didn't ache the way it used to. It didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like release, like that little hollow was holding space for something new. Maybe love doesn't vanish, it just changes form. Maybe James wasn't gone, maybe he was scattered across the things that still moved me. Emily's laughter, the smell of rain, the courage to keep going when the world felt heavy. I thought back to the day I'd walked into that pawnshop, heart breaking, hands shaking. I'd felt like I was giving up everything. But now I saw it differently. That moment hadn't been the end, it had been the beginning of us finding our way again. A week later, I got a letter from the art school. Emily's scholarship had been approved, not just for one term but for the full year. I sat at the kitchen table, rereading the letter through tears. The envelope trembled in my hands and I laughed, a full, surprised, joyful laugh I hadn't heard from myself in so long. When Emily came home, I handed it to her without saying a word. She opened it, read it, and screamed so loud the neighbors probably heard. Then she threw her arms around me, sobbing and laughing all at once. "Mom," she said breathlessly, "we did it." I hugged her back and whispered, "No, sweetheart, you did it. You worked for this, you earned it." But deep down I knew it wasn't just her victory. It was ours. It was James, too. It was every sleepless night, every dollar saved, every tear shed coming together in this one shining moment. That evening I went for a walk alone. The streets were quiet, the air crisp. I found myself in front of the pawnshop again. The lights inside were dim, the shelves rearranged. I stood there, hands tucked into my coat, and wondered if my ring was still there or if someone else had found it. A woman stepped out of the shop holding a small box, smiling softly to herself. I didn't ask, but in my heart I hoped she'd found it, that the ring would live another love story, wrap itself around another promise. And I hoped too that maybe one day Emily would wear a ring like that, one that didn't just mean love, but sacrifice, endurance, hope. When I got home, Emily was sitting at the table, sketching under the soft yellow light. "Hey," she said without looking up, "I'm drawing something new, want to see?" She turned the paper toward me. It was a sketch of a hand holding a small, glowing circle, Not a ring, not exactly, more like a light. It's called the gift, she said. It's about the moment you give something up and how it finds its way back to you. I just stared at it, unable to speak. She didn't know how perfectly she'd captured it, our story, our journey. I reached out, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and whispered, "It's beautiful, Emily, it's perfect." She smiled, and in that smile, I saw every reason I'd ever had to keep going. Later that night, I stood by the window again. The stars looked closer somehow, brighter. The city slept beneath their quiet glow, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time, peace. I thought about all the women like me, the ones who have sold something precious to save something even more so. The mothers who have given up their dreams so their children could chase theirs. The ones who have been told love ends when loss begins. If only they knew the truth, love doesn't end, it transforms. I sold my wedding ring to save my daughter's dream. But what I really sold was my fear. And what I got back was faith. Faith that even when everything seems to be breaking apart, love finds a way to build something new from the pieces. When I finally went to bed, Emily was already asleep, her sketchbook resting on her chest. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "Thank you, baby, for reminding me why I stayed strong." Then I turned off the light and lay there in the dark, the faint hum of the city outside my window. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt James's hand in mine, warm, steady, silent. "See," his voice said somewhere in my heart, "you never lost me, you just found your way forward." I smiled through tears, because he was right. And as I drifted into sleep, I realized. That was the day everything broke. And that was the day everything began again.